Well, I'm a bit overwhelmed to find so many people here wanting to hear what I have to say. It's wonderful. It's truly wonderful. Thank you. So, the subject of the day, where did the towers go? Let's see. Well, once upon a time, there were two towers. Then they went away. That material there is all that was left of that building. That's building 3. A lot of people overlook that building. And this is the remains of Tower 2, about the lobby size down there. To remind you of how big of a mass was there. And then it is gone. This picture was taken on 9/11. Where is all the debris? But everybody wants to know who did it. They just have to know who did it. And so they jump to conclusions. But the planes did it. No, it was bombs in the building. No, it was thermite. And pretty soon there's just answers all over the place of what they think it could be. Spray-on thermite, 4th generation, mini nukes. Just throwing out answers. You can't really find the answer that way. Because if you had a dead body you came upon, how did it die? Well, we found a smoking gun. Now we know it had to be the gun that did it. But then it turns out you found the dead body underneath the garage door. The garage door must have done it. Wait a minute, maybe he was poisoned. So guessing the answer with just a few details is not a good way to go. I don't know if many of you heard about this case that really was just oversaturated in our media. This case of Casey Anthony, a mother accused of killing her child, and then was found not guilty and everyone was shocked. Not everyone, but the people who were following the story were shocked. But the next day, Jennifer Ford, one of the jurors, getting feedback here, spoke to the media saying they did not know how the child died. How can you convict somebody of a crime if you don't know what crime they even committed? The jury did not know what happened. So finding out what happened is the most important thing. Then you can determine how it happened, who is involved, why they did it. But what we're going to concentrate on, because it's the most important thing, is what happened. The main thing of what happened, the towers didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground. They turned into dust in midair. How do we know that? Wait, does that look like a collapse to you? We were told it was a collapse. We were basically brainwashed into reacting to this picture like flashcards. Memorize the word collapse when you see this. But that's not a collapse. If they had hit the ground, if they had slammed into the ground, there would be over 1 million tons of debris piled up on the ground. But that didn't happen. If they had slammed to the ground, Manhattan would have been flooded because the bathtub, which holds out the Hudson River, would have been ruptured. We'll talk about the bathtub a little bit more. That didn't happen. And if they'd slammed to the ground, the seismic readings would have recorded 2 500,000-ton buildings slamming to the ground, plus a 230,000-ton building slamming to the ground. And that didn't happen. So we first are going to determine what happened by looking at these 3 main areas, and then there's a whole host of other areas we'll look at as well. So here we have what was left after the towers went away. Only buildings with a WTC prefix were destroyed that day. Really hardly anything else was even scratched. A few damaging things here and there, but nothing catastrophic that couldn't be repaired. That's all that was left of the north tower. North wall, the south wall, and a little bit of stairwell B. Now the towers were steel structures with aluminum cladding on the outside. Well, you see a few pieces of aluminum cladding laying around. Yeah, you get a steel piece there. But right in front of the front door, why don't you have piles of steel structure? And there's this ambulance in pretty much pristine condition. Maybe the door got done a little bit, but I don't see any big piece of steel clobbering the top of it. And we know the park ambulance is at ground level, not up in space. So that's ground level. Here's a newscast from the 24 hours later.
Down in Lower Manhattan today, George. I don't know if you heard a little earlier me raise this question, which was actually raised by ABC's Jackie Judd as we look at these areas down below, and the video of where the towers used to stand and where is all the rubble gone. And have you been able to, is there any way you can answer that question?
I'm sorry, Peter, I didn't get the question.
Okay, I apologize. Jackie Judd and several other people keep asking us, when you look at where the towers used to stand, there is surprisingly so little rubble. Where did all the rubble go?
It's a very good question, Peter, and I have asked some people who've been doing some of the rescue and recovery work this morning. If you look behind me, you can see the very remains, the skeletal remains of the World Trade Center. And one volunteer, Robert Gerlinski, explained to me the reason there's so little rubble is that all of it simply fell down into the ground and was pulverized, evaporated.
What was that he said? Fell down to the ground, was pulverized, and evaporated. I don't mean to be making fun of these people at all. They're trying to explain what they see. They don't see enough debris. And they're trying to come up with some explanation as to where the building went. Actually, that video clip I saw that day, and that partially inspired the title of the book. Because why did people quit asking that question? Here's another short clip the following day.
I was astonished at the degree to which solid materials were turned into pulverized dust as a consequence of that building collapse. I think it was striking.
People were shocked. It did not make sense how much it was turned to dust. The top view of what was left, we have Building 3 here, Tower 1, Tower 2, Building 6, it had all these cylindrical cutouts in it. Approximately the middle 50% of that building's missing. Building 5 had cylindrical cutouts in it. Some circular cutouts there. Building 7 went missing. The buildings on either side weren't really destroyed much. There's some stab wounds, I call it, some pieces of steel beam that went into this building, but essentially nothing happened to this building. The sidewalk in front of it didn't even get covered. And Building 4, that's when it often gets forgotten. The north wing of it seemed to be sliced off like with an X-Acto knife, and the main body of the building just went missing. Just the north wing stayed, or that part of the north wing. Here's that remaining stub of the north wing of Building 4, and looking at it directly on, here's what you would see. If you looked out of through the building across the street with binoculars, looked in, you could probably see what was left on someone's desk in there. Come to think of it, it reminded me of an image I saw as a child when my family drove through Topeka, Kansas the morning after that horrendous tornado that tore up a large part of Topeka, Kansas. I remember seeing this apartment building, it was probably a dorm, but to a child it was an apartment building, sliced in two. Half of it was just gone, and the other half, like nothing happened. The bed was still made, magazines on the bedspread, some books on the dresser, and clothes hanging in the closet that did not look disturbed. No support under that floor, so I really don't think somebody walked in there and made the bed. It was just unsupported hanging there. And it also might remind you of the Pentagon. It's a clean slice. From ground level, here's what it looked like that day. There's just this little corner left. And after they cleaned up the corner, there's that sliced off part of the north wing. So here's what was left, this elevation map, but there's what should have been there, that ghost pattern. And if you notice, there's a little pimple down there at the bottom of Building 3. 14 folks survived down there. The rest of the building went away, and who was left in that little corner there survived. Also, the bottom of Tower 1, that little hump there, that was stairwell B. 14 people survived there as well. And one of them, when they came out, said this. I looked and said, guys, there used to be 106 floors above us, and now I'm seeing sunshine. There's nothing above us. That big building doesn't exist. These are the biggest office buildings in the world, and I didn't see one desk or one chair or one phone, nothing. Another one talked about walking out onto an empty football field. Something I've often talked about is toilets. There should be at least 3,000 toilets in those buildings. Busted up toilets are easy to recognize. Recognizable parts. So you have all this gray dust, you should have some nice shiny sections of porcelain, assuming that is what they used. But you didn't see any. Not one bit. Again, here's the cutout part of Building 6 and those other cylindrical holes. We're going to concentrate on the main body of Building 4 for a minute, because it's fascinating the way it just went missing. Here's an actual photograph of that area. There's that tiny little corner, but the rest of it just went missing. There's a Burger King across the street. They were still flipping burgers over there, feeding the firefighters. The irony is just amazing. And right across the street from there, there's round holes in those windows. We'll see the pictures later. A rock goes through a window, it breaks the window. A baseball goes through the window, it shatters the window. Doesn't make a perfectly round hole. Again, this is the elevation map. And right there, I found a picture just below ground, from the mall. There was a mall, the first level below ground. And then 2 more stories below that was the loading docks. And we'll also look at that. It was this shape, the drive in here, and it was color-coded. This area is purple to let the driver know he's under Building 5, and it was green under Building 4, so they would know where to park. And we're going to look down this way and see this intact end of that parking garage. Here they are walking 1 story below ground. This is innovation luggage, and this is Hallmark cards. They a little bit punched through over here, but it didn't go much below this level. This is down in the parking garage.
Going down to the parking garage. We're in quite deep.
These are the first pictures of search crews underneath the World Trade Center, desperately looking for survivors.
That wasn't necessarily this area, but you hear that echo? Someone down there? You know, the echoes. That wasn't even a full parking garage. That echo was tremendous. So again, the purple is under Building 5, green is under Building 4. Right above the end of that hallway is where that building went missing. Where'd it go? Mind you, that was also the location where the top of Tower 2 was tipping over and then it turned to dust. That's where it would have fallen. If the top 35 floors of Tower 2 had fallen to the ground, landed on Building 4, would it have looked like that? Now we're looking back from between Building 4 and 5 through the complex. There's Stairwell B where those folks survived, those 14 people who thought that when the building came apart, they thought they were so buried it would be forever till they could get to them and they'd be dead before workers could pull the rubble off of them. But then the dust cleared and they looked up at blue sky. There would be over 1 million tons of debris piled on the ground if those towers had slammed to the ground. Didn't happen. Looking from 180 degrees on the other side, again, here's Stairwell B, the north and south facade. Where's the debris? There is some, okay, you get a few pieces of stuff here and there, but it's not anywhere near the amount to explain 2 110-story buildings and a 22-story building. Where to go? One of the other folks who were trapped in Stairwell B was calling out to be rescued and saying, his buddies would call back and say, "Where are you?" He said, "Stairwell B, Tower 1. "Where?" "Tower 1, Stairwell B." "Where are you?" "Stairwell B, Tower 1. It's, you know, like, why aren't you listening? Then the boys said, "Where's Tower 1? Or where's the North Tower?" From the outside, you would wonder too. They were right in this little spot there. And they walked out. Once the dust cleared and they could see where they were going. Here's Stairwell B in this area. There's the north wall of the North Tower. This is a building 6 with the big gaping hole in the middle. It's an 8-story building. What remains of the north wall of Tower 1 is about 8 stories. That was a 110-story building. So where are the other 102 stories of just the north wall? Not to mention what goes inside. And you can see over here where Building 7 had stood, it didn't even spill completely across that street onto the sidewalk. The post office, the wall, doesn't look like stuff hit it. Doesn't look like a machine gun fired at it. If you're squashing down a 47-story building, that material has got to go somewhere. And it would be shot at. In order to get it smushed to the ground that amount of time, the material has to be launched out of there like Mach 1. But that doesn't look like a machine gun hit it. Here's another image. Stairwell B, north wall. And here we have the bathtub wall. We haven't talked about that yet. The bathtub held out the Hudson River, and this building was very close to that wall. It's like having it next to a dike. If that building had slammed to the ground, it would have damaged that bathtub, ruptured it, and flooded Manhattan. Well, let's talk about what the bathtub is. Before, when the towers were first built, there was just the towers out there. They were built on bedrock 70 feet below the water table. And they extended out, you know, wanting to get more real estate on Manhattan. And later they built more buildings out, but it was right at water level. And so there was this wall that kept the Hudson River from flowing in. Manhattan would have been flooded if that crashed to the ground. Here we're looking down 70 feet below the water table onto that bedrock. There's the bathtub wall. Here's the west side. The old shoreline used to be right about here. There's a map of it. There's the old shoreline. They basically built the towers in the Hudson River and built this dike all the way around. They called it bathtub wall, or sometimes they call it the slurry wall. In the early 1900s, as you can see, 1909, They finished the PATH train station, and the subway would go underneath the Hudson River, came up, turned around there, and went back out. When they built the towers, they relocated inside this bathtub. And then you had the intersection with the subways that went around Manhattan. This is all below the water table. So if you broke that bathtub wall, subways would be flooded, all of lower Manhattan would really be destroyed. Another image of it, and they're starting to build out and extend out here, which they later did and built the WFC buildings. And again, you can see down deep into the basement. And another image, you can see right here is the old shoreline, and they extended out from there. And after 9/11, they cleaned out the debris. Voila, a clean bathtub. I'm not saying there was zero damage, but there was no significant damage. There was water hoses being poured all over the quote, pile, over the debris field here, and it ran down into the tunnels. Here's a tunnel opening. And they were worried for a bit to see if it was leaking, but once they pumped it dry, it stayed dry. It was not damaged. And a view looking west. This is the new buildings they built when they extended it out further. This is the footprint of Tower 1, right here, right up against that wall. If that tower had fallen over, crashed down, whatever, if it had slammed to the ground any which way, it would have ruptured that bathtub wall. Mind you, that's an old wall. Now let's look at that third issue, the seismic impact. First of all, if you drop a bowling ball off the roof of the North Tower, without even considering air resistance, it's going to take 9.2 seconds to reach the bottom. This is time, and this is height. So here's a blue billiard ball. As you drop it down, of course it goes faster per time. It's going to take a little over 9 seconds to hit the ground. That's a billiard ball with no resistance. But imagine if one floor has to fall and hit the next floor and hit the next floor and so forth. Just looking at the timing. Well, as we saw, each time it hit, it turned to dust. There's all this dust pouring out. So looking at that timing, well, the building's damaged, so therefore it went faster. Let's overestimate the damage, well overestimate the damage. Let's say 9 out of every 10 floors is hollow, is missing. So the first floor will fall 10 stories before it hits the next one. But as soon as it hits, it turns to dust. But let's assume it has enough energy to get the next one started. It doesn't, but let's assume it does. Then that one has to wait until the blue ball gets there to start that one going. And even at that, it's over 30 seconds. Imagine if it was every single floor, well over 100 seconds. But it takes time to put things in a trash compactor. Trash compactors don't work instantly to squash material. But even more interesting is the length of time. It took 8 seconds that the ground shook. How does that work? Only 8 seconds the ground shook. If you get something you're hammering down, the ground should be shaken a good bit of that time. Even more noticeable, it's missing anything beforehand. The seismic recordings would have reflected 2 500,000-ton buildings slamming to the ground, but they did not. Didn't happen. One of the emergency workers, one of the first responders, made this comment: "I don't remember the sound of the building hitting the ground. Somebody told me that it measured on the Richter scale. I don't know how true that is. Because if a building is hitting the ground that hard, how do I not remember the sound of it?" Buildings silently hitting the ground? I guess this part of the building doesn't make a thud when it hits. The building is completely turned to dust or near completely turned to dust. It's not going to make a thud. It comes down like snow. In controlled demolitions, when a building slams the ground, that's when it is broken up, and that's when the dust is created. This is an earthquake that was in Manhattan in January of that year, on the same bedrock. It was in Midtown Manhattan. So we can test how that bedrock carries a signal. How does this look compared to that other chart? This has a whole lot more high-frequency waves, a whole lot more going on. That other one looks like it's over-filtered or something's weird about it, but worse than that. Look at this. I call this the nozzle kind of leading up to the big signal. This is when the P wave arrives, the primary wave and then the secondary wave. And you can tell how far away an earthquake is by the delay of those, if it travels through the ground. If it doesn't travel through the ground, you don't get S wave and P waves. You only get surface waves. Now, let's look at the signal from Tower 1. No S wave and P wave arrival. Only surface waves. And look how much smoother it is. It's not that high frequency kind of rattling look. And it's approximately the same magnitude. This is a 2.3 instead of a 2.4. So we know that bedrock can transfer seismic signals. So let's compare it to, well, first let's look at Tower 2. It had already gone by that point, but Tower 1. That's what it looked like on the overall scale. It's a 2.3. It should have been more, much higher number. And then all afternoon there were still these quarry blasts in New Jersey and in Pennsylvania that measured on the Richter scale. So we know that the seismic charts were working. And then the Fox Islands, there was an earthquake there. But just before that earthquake, Building 7 went away, dropped and turned to dust, its final demise. But what was most striking about that is that little red vertical line, that's when it happened. And there's nothing really that stands out and apart from background noise. Where's the signal for Building 7? It should be at least this. The Seattle King Dome was a controlled demolition. So let's analyze that. It's got a whole lot of data out there. There's a reason why I used it. Notice that the dust doesn't rise much above the highest point of the building. And afterwards, there's stuff left over. These are people down here, these little specks. So that's a lot of material that's left, and you can recognize what it used to be. And this is the signal it leaves. Notice it has an S wave and a P wave arrival. And it lasts like 52 seconds for the majority of it. If you dropped a bowling ball off the roof of the King Dome, it would take about 3.9 seconds to hit the pavement below. It's a lot shorter. So we're just going to use that for a way to compare the length of signals. So let's average it to 4 seconds. But the major part of the ground shaking was 9 seconds. There's a lot more that shook after that, as the pile was probably readjusting and things were happening. And what was also interesting is the Seattle Times said, my gosh, the dust was in the air for almost 20 minutes. Not 99 days. Here's the seismic signals from 5 different recording stations for Building 7. If you're real creative, you can pick out something from background noise, but not much. This station, nobody could pick anything out from background noise. Now, they calculated when the S and P waves were to arrive. They calculated that, but you don't see anything happening there. Just a hint of some disturbance in the surface wave. But again, this station They couldn't even guess. Now, this building has 6 times, or had 6 times the potential energy of the King Dome. It should have at least registered the same as the King Dome on the Richter scale, which was a 2.3, like Building 1 registered. Building 1 was 30 times the potential energy. So here's the King Dome. We'll look at things relative to the other towers with that. If you turned all but the bottom 20 stories to dust of Tower 1, you would get approximately that seismic signal that we saw. Not without the S&P wave, but the magnitude. And for the South Tower, if you dustified all but the bottom 16 stories, that would explain why we only had a 2.1 on the Richter scale. For Building 7, that 0.6 on the Richter scale is like the bottom 2.5 stories falling to the ground, just about nothing. With the new phenomenon, we need a new word to describe it. Because using a known term for a known phenomenon that doesn't apply to a new phenomenon is not scientific. For what happened to the towers, I've used the word dustification. I think it's pretty clear what it means. It's a new phenomenon. We haven't seen a building get dustified before. So if we're, just pretend for argument's sake, a collapse of some sort, whether it's, pancake collapse, whatnot. Bombs have to shoot stuff out at a high speed. The point is, if this building is to get to the ground in 9 seconds, the material in this region has to go somewhere, has to shoot out at a tremendous speed. As it turns out, around Mach 1, depends on if you use 8 seconds of the ground shook or 9 seconds we calculate it would take. That's what the two differences are. If it was the 8 seconds, somewhere around this level, it would exceed Mach 1, the average speed the stuff would have to shoot out of the building at. Up here, just right at the top of the building, it would already be exceeding Category 5 hurricane strength, the air pushing out of the building. And the center air traveling out would exceed Mach 2.5, somewhere near the bottom. So with this stuff, like somebody's Coke can on the windowsill, it's going to get launched at a tremendous speed and hit all of the adjacent buildings. It would be like a machine gun fire. That didn't happen. Only one explanation I can think of would explain that. The building turned to dust. Another interesting phenomenon. This is Building 2 being turned to dust. The top tips over, shrinks up before the rest starts down. It even looks like this is tipping over and then tips back a little bit. Many folks have probably seen that video. It looks like it violates the laws of conservation of momentum, but it doesn't necessarily. It does for a rigid body, but it's not a rigid body anymore. If the thing starts rotating and appears to stop rotating, but each of the little specks in it are rotating locally, it can maintain conservation of momentum, not break the laws of physics. So it implies that the top was turned to dust. And sure enough, I mean, the rest of the building's still standing here, but this turns to dust first. Which adds to another question. If before the tower gets destroyed, you have the same stress across here. If it tips, you have less stress on this back corner. You've unloaded the building. This building here is used to carrying a bunch of weight on it, and you've taken that weight off. Why is it going to collapse? Now, I've called this phenomenon Alka-Seltzer. An Alka-Seltzer tablet, take it out of the package and it's dry, and it'll stay looking the same, won't really change much, until you change its environment. If you drop it in a glass of water, it effervesces and dissolves if you change its environment. This is steel. Steel usually doesn't have dust shooting out the back of it. Perhaps its environment changed. And I'll point out, these are the pieces of aluminum cladding. They don't look as affected. But this steel, I call these wheat checks. One of the photographers called it that, and they look like wheat checks. What, you call them shreddies here? Yeah. That they're 3 columns wide, 3 stories tall. They're prefabricated at the shop and then hauled out to the building and put in place, prefabricated. So when the building came apart, it fell apart into those prefabricated chunks. So here's a wheat checks falling to the ground. Turns out it never reached the ground. Turned to dust first. Here's a slow motion image of these pieces coming down. And a little bit into it, you'll see a piece falling down this corner in front of it. That's the corner of Vesey Street and West Street. I think this is the one coming here. Yeah, you see this like a stick. Mm-hmm. Keep watching it. It turns to dust. In a minute, we're going to look down that intersection where this stuff should have landed. I have a faster one of this, but notice how all this is trailing dust. That's not from a dirty windowsill. Here's the faster one. It'll play a few times. You also see things squirting out as it moves down. But this piece is quite interesting how it turns dust. And this is the Verizon building. And we're looking at the intersection. There's West Street goes that way and Vesey Street goes this other way. And here's where it should have landed. This is right after the destruction of Tower 1. These people were in their hiding places, apparently, and they've come out of their hiding places. Look at the body language. Hands at the side, hands on the hips, arms folded, arms at the sides. They're shocked. There should be a big building right there. Paper and dust. Yeah, there's a piece of aluminum cladding there, but I think there should be a little bit more material. We were looking down here from A1, from that direction. In this picture over here, we're looking from A2. That's the same intersection. There was just a sea of unburned paper and dust. And then this car park went into spontaneous combustion. It appeared to go into spontaneous combustion. So not make any assumptions. We don't know what was happening, but you can see orange looking, what looks like flames, something glowing in there. Now we're going to look from B1 and B2 positions as well as from C at what's referred to as the spire. There's that clump of core columns from Tower 1 that seems to remain just a little bit after the rest and then turns to dust. I'm sort of expecting that is, or suspicious that is right above where those 14 people survived, who thought they would have been crushed and looked up and saw blue sky. Here's Tower 1 coming apart, and it peels away like peeling a banana, and left with these little spires sticking up. That's about 700 feet tall. It's got to be pretty strong to be standing unsupported that tall. Here's Building 7, which is a 47-story building. It's like 650 feet tall, approximately. This has got to be over that. And here's a closer view, and then it starts to drop down and kind of faints, turns to dust. Now, if that thing tipped over, it would take out a few blocks worth of buildings. How's it going to go straight down? You got a 700-foot hole in the ground to drop it into? Okay, for argument's sake, let's pretend we do have a 700-foot hole we're going to drop it into. And you're saying that that's dust that shook off it that settled back here? That's blue sky around that. That's not dust gradually settling. If dust is that fine to hang in the air, it wouldn't be settled on it in that amount of time. So we know it doesn't have much time at all for dust to settle on it. And right after that, here it is from a slightly different angle. It'll just faint. Just faints and dustifies. Pretty neat trick. Now we're going to look at still frames from yet a different position. Remember, it peels away like a banana, leaves it exposed. Blue sky, crisp edges. That's not dust settling on it. And then it comes to the point where it no longer has crisp edges and dustifies. Now we're going to look at it from across the river, yet a different angle. You can see it turning to dust. You know, it isn't tipping over in any particular direction. Oh, let me back up on that one. Oops, I backed up too fast. Okay. See how the dust cloud is sort of wrapping around this building? It's a little bit more wrapped around. So you can tell there's not much time has passed between those two images. Another one of my terms is lather. Like lather in a shower, but you're not going to confuse that with what happened on 9/11. But it's a familiar word. It's a lot easier to remember than characteristic 2579-7A. So it's actually more scientific than an arbitrary term like that because you can identify it. Didn't it look like that Alka-Seltzer effect that was lather kind of pouring out? Well, it turns out the building's lathered up too. From ground to roof, one side and one side only. Not only that, this is building 7, the north face, and we have busted out windows, but the fumes don't want to come out there. I'm just using fumes as generic, not saying smoke. We don't know what this is, but from ground to roof. And the wind that day was only like 7, 8 or 8 miles per hour. So it wasn't a stiff breeze, and you can see that by some wafting out this face.
No, go low to the corner.
Doesn't come out this window. Comes out that one, but comes out this one down here, but not up there. It's very energized. If it was smoke from a fire inside, first of all, it wouldn't come out of the entire face of the building. And second of all, you have a bottleneck there. It goes for the path of least resistance. And you would have something coming out there.
Go low to the corner.
It's not pushing out, it's being sucked out, it looks like. We don't need to know what caused it to just be able to observe what's happening. That does not look like a fire pouring out a window. And that poured out of the building all afternoon for 7 hours. That's a lot of material. Maybe that has to do with why it didn't make a thud when it hit the ground. So we're going to talk about the dust rollout. It's another interesting issue. It's guy's running down the street, dust cloud chasing him. A wall of dust. A wall of dust? If junk slammed to the ground, the dust rolls out from the ground. It doesn't come as a wall. Now, I saw this, it kind of made me think of getting the whole building, grinding it up and turning it into dust within some like glass walls. So you have all this froth in there, and then you take away the sideboards and let it just move outward. Like it was already turned to dust before it was cut loose. And as it went down the street, it ran over people, didn't leave them burned, just left them covered with dust. This one is particularly interesting, the contrast. Whitehead. But these people were hit with dust, like you can see where his tie had been. The dust rolled a particular distance and then went up. Bob and Bree were in that apartment there, and it was wonderful of them to have shared their video. They took a video of this dust cloud rolling out. It didn't quite touch their window and went up. Never touched their window, like within an inch or two. It was amazing.
Oh my God!
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! I told you! Oh my God! All these people! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
Oh, it's awful.
Oh baby, hold Lily. Oh my God!
Come on, let's go to the other room. God.
Is this dangerous?
I think it's just smoke.
Is the air conditioner turned off in the room? And the windows closed in the bedroom?
Near the area are an absolute crazy situation. The entire top of the building just collapsed.
The entire building is collapsed.
Building just collapsed.
We're going to leave because the smoke is coming right at us.
Obviously, this is a devastating development in our history. They're gone. The World Trade Center is no more. We do not know at this point the extent of injuries or casualties, how many people were in these buildings trying to get out. We've seen some gut wrenching.
Oh, people are running away. They're running away.
Hanging out of windows.
What are they going to do? You guys got to run away.
You see the obvious.
Look at the plume.
All right, let's go to ABC News right now.
I think it's going to be blown away from us. No, it's the wind is being blown away.
Horrific, incredible, not to be believed. Tuesday morning, you are looking at live pictures of the World Trade Center where just a few minutes ago, within the last minute actually, the second Twin Tower collapsed. Just to recap, if you're just joining us, around 8:42 Eastern Time this morning here in New York City, a plane crashed into the right Twin Tower of the World Trade Center about 2/3 of the way up the building, leaving a huge gaping hole, a huge fire, and tons of billowing smoke. About 25 minutes later, a second jet, believed to be a 727 or a 737, then crashed in a second twin.
All these people running away.
But the dust rolls out a particular distance. What would explain that? Well, I'm thinking if you throw rocks, they go pretty big distance. If you throw flour, dust, it doesn't go very far at all because it has a lot of surface area per mass, a lot of wind resistance, so dust doesn't go very far. But if you throw rocks and they become dust in midair, at a particular rate, they'll reach maximum distance and stop going up. Stop going out, and then if they're fine enough, they'll start going up. This dust went up. You can imagine people who were down in this area, total blackout. 100% of the sunlight was blocked out. This is a view, a couple of the frames from their video. You can see the dust rising. It rose like yeast bread. It never hit their window. Just rose up. Really spooky looking. And other types of things kept breaking down and rising up. Here's water being misted onto what was left of ground zero, what was left of the debris field. And they brought in wet dirt, dumped it on it. This was Halloween, like 6 weeks later, after 9/11. This isn't fire. That's not what fire does. Wet dirt, dirt tracks. Also, if it were hot, you wouldn't put your hydraulic equipment out there. Hydraulics have permanent damage if operated above like 82 centigrade. But that dust went up, or whatever it was, those fumes, I call it fumes just generically, like it was on a mission to go up. It almost looks like a funnel cloud. Dark stuff went westward. The whitish stuff went south and up to a certain altitude and then sort of wafts away. This is a close-up of that. Then we have the toasted cars. This one was over on FDR Drive. Nice, healthy-looking tire. Not so healthy-looking window trim. What happened to that car? We don't know where it was damaged, but there's a whole lot of them over here on FDR Drive, which is the opposite side from where the towers are located on Manhattan. And to give a little closer look here, we're going to look at both sides. This is the right side of this police car. You have a very abrupt boundary between the toasted area and the not toasted area. By toasted, I'm not implying cause. It doesn't mean that it was burnt. Toast, it's history. You use that term here? It's toast. You can't fix it. You have to buy a new one, or you can't repair it. So this is, something happened to this. The plastic lights on top, they didn't get cooked. So it doesn't appear to have been heat related. And the inside is very toasted all the way inside the door, but for some reason that from here back is not toasted. And looking at the other side of the car, it has a spot that's not toasted. Here's a closer up view of it. Abrupt, like it had a mask over it in the darkroom. One part was exposed and one part wasn't. But wait a minute, fire doesn't work like that. Fire, you have the burnt area, the not burnt area, and then a transition in between, like black and white and shades of gray. You don't have totally toasted, not toasted at all, 1 nanometer away from that boundary. Again, nice back tire. And the trunk lids popped up. I noticed that pattern, as though the material that latches the doors is one of the easiest materials to get destroyed. And it does seem material specific. In the center of where the towers were destroyed, like everything pretty much was, but as you move outward, things that are just partially affected. You know, what gets affected first? There's another interesting thing. I know Andrew's talked about this. The upside down cars. I remember when I first showed Andrew this picture, I said, Andrew, why is the car upside down? Why is it parked upside down? Got trees over there.
I swore.
What?
I swore at that.
And this police car here, but notice the upside down ones aren't as toasted on the bottom. It's like they either get toasted or they get flipped. You get some interesting tires sticking up in the air there, like it did a face plant in the street. And here's that night.
And you said you saw melted tour buses, melted cars?
The cars that were right down there, it was just unbelievable. They were twisted and melted into nothing. The debris is just unbelievable. And then you can see fire trucks and police vehicles that were down there early that all their windows, the windshield are completely blown out. Must have been from when debris dropped.
But even more jarring, I think, is this scene right here. Look at these two cars placed on top of one another. I think when you think about the impact that these planes must have had, it's hard to visualize it because everything melted. But here, at least you have some remnants. You have literally an engine that is melded together with other parts of the car. Moving over, you've got another car they moved here. It looks like it's been through a war. You can see the papers, all the burned out papers from the building. You see the soot and the dirt, and it just shows you how devastating this blast was. Look across the street there. You've got a Con Ed truck that, you know, some of the Con Ed people now looking at, examining, trying to figure out which truck that actually was. But that truck, too, in terrible shape. So while many of the items, the steel, was literally melted,
people who have been right down next to the base of what was the trade towers say there's virtually nothing left, maybe a few flights of stairs, a few stories of one of the buildings, but that when they came down there was so much melting and so much demolishing of any kind of structure that they cannot imagine much being left or much hope of finding anybody alive.
Now, why did they have, why was it melted? But none of the people walking around there were burnt. None of the paper was burned. Well, very little of the paper was burned. A lot of unburned paper. So here we're looking at the toasted cars. Patrick Connolly was right around the corner there when one of the towers was turning to dust. He had to head for cover, and he managed to get inside that door. This is building 7. He went in there and started to go down to the bomb shelter in the basement and said, something's not right here. The bomb shelter was destroyed down in the basement. So he came out, couldn't really see where he was going, and starts heading up the road. And as he was heading up the road, making his way, thank goodness those cars went into spontaneous combustion, because then he had light and could see where he was going. It was total blackout. Notice the unburned paper all over the place. Here's where the towers were, FDR Drive. That's West Broadway. I sometimes refer to it as the swamp because it kind of looked like a swamp. With all the wet paper, you know, fire hoses on the paper and dust and junk. Only the cars there were toasted. That's the toasted car park. FDR Drive. Now some folks believe that the cars were towed there. Well, not all of them were towed there. I don't know if any were, but I know some were not. There's a first responder down here who witnessed the spontaneous combustion of these cars, and like George Stephanopoulos' friend, was trying to explain it away and thought maybe a fireball got loose from one of the towers and rolled down the street and caught the cars on fire. That was the best he could come up with. Also, what was interesting is over here on the Manhattan Bridge, there were some first responders, some EMTs driving towards the World Trade Center. They said you could feel the heat from the bridge. It was so hot from the towers. But paper over here was not burned. How could you feel heat from there? I'll bet you felt something and interpreted as heat. Some kind of energy field. Because that's quite a distance away. So now we're going to look at where Patrick Connolly walked up West Broadway. Again, there's the car park, and there's West Broadway. It goes right past Building 7. So he came out of that door from Building 7 and started walking up. And this distance all the way up here, just, you know, end-to-end toasted cars. Here's Building 7. He came up to intersection C, turned left at that point. You can see from above toasted cars all the way up to here in a wet street with, you know, the mushy wet paper and debris and so forth. Now, what caught all those cars on fire, if you believe they're caught on fire? Falling debris from the towers? Well, why didn't it fall on these buildings? Only dust fell on those buildings. So how'd the burning debris get down in the canyons? Yeah, that's a pretty deep canyon. Here's Building 7. It was early enough in the day that you don't see any fire yet coming out of Building 7 or any. It doesn't look like it's in distress. This bus, to me, it doesn't look like it burned up. Burnt things usually look black, and then soot. I don't see any flame marks. This car here looks rusted. That's pretty fast for steel to rust. This is West Broadway. Notice the missing door handle. Missing engine.
Go, let's go. Go. 3, 2. Oh, man. More debris falling from a nearby building, the World Trade Center. We're at West Broadway and Barclay. Very difficult to breathe here, but look around. This must have been ground zero where this thing blew up. Car after car after car. Buses completely obliterated and burned straight down to the steel. Behind me.
That engine block? Wait, what? Why would it be gone? That hood. Oops, there we go. So this is more of that same street. Missing door handles. Another one looks like the engine, something happened to it. Engine compartment. Rusty car. This is still early in the day. Building 7 is still in good shape. I don't know what that is. It kind of looks like a leg on the pavement there. But some strange things. Notice the trunk lids popped open. Doors open like the latches disintegrate quickly. This police car is interesting. Right at where the door seam is, it's toasted back there, but not up in the front. As though the rubber gasket seals it, like, electricity. Don't know. Nice tire. But strange disintegration or toasting. Now, folks say, well, yeah, car fires are like that. I can tell you the difference between these cars and a regular car fire. Look at this windshield, or lack of. It looks like it was wire brushed almost, ready for another paint job. Cars that have been burnt from a car fire, you'd find scraps of glass left in the corner somewhere. This is like everything gone. Here's the corner where Patrick Connolly turned. It was pitch black. You couldn't have seen your hand in front of your face if it weren't for whatever this was. It looks like fire. Now, there's things I call Cheetos. Looks like little Cheetos on the ground. I brought along, from the United States, example of Cheetos. They look just like that. There's little orange things. Ah, now you know. What you call it, what's-its here? See how this look like it's little orange glowing things? Now, you're not going to confuse that with snack food, but I'm pointing out that there's something weird about it. This orange thing, it doesn't really act like hot things would. And so I sometimes refer to this as a Cheeto fire. I don't want to make it assume that it's a regular fire. It may be, but maybe it isn't. This sure isn't regular. This is a contrast, high contrast version of this. Look at this fire on what appears to be fire on the side of the van. What's burning? Just the side panel of the van has flames coming out of it. And I didn't see one bit of evidence showing a gas tank or a petrol tank exploded. They didn't seem to explode. It was something else going on. Paper, not burned. Doo-doo-doo. Do you think they're used to seeing that? There's in some of the transcripts, they're saying, well, we're waiting for so-and-so, so we just start putting out car fires. What else is there to do? But it was also interesting that some of them said initially the water had no effect on these fires. Hot things glow, but not everything that glows is hot. Yes, hot things do glow, but just because it's glowing doesn't mean it's hot. I don't know if you have fireflies here. Yes, they glow. They glow probably from a chemical type thing. Also, these are, I guess, incandescent bulbs, but there's also fluorescent bulbs. They produce heat from different mechanisms. Fluorescent bulb, you wouldn't want to unscrew it while it's hot. Fluorescent bulb, no problem. So it's a different mechanism. Thinking about that, all right, you have what appears to be unburned paper, something glowing. And someone in the truther movement would often say, see, molten metal. Wait a minute, molten metal from heat? Oh, why isn't the paper burning? You got these orange Cheetos over here. And sometimes you have Cheetos sitting on paper, paper's not burning. That doesn't make sense. Another big thing with this is that this is aluminum cladding from the buildings. Pure aluminum melts at about 660 Fahrenheit. Centigrade. It's lower, slightly lower if it's an alloy. So no more than 660 centigrade, probably 600 centigrade is the melting temperature of the aluminum cladding, somewhere in the low 600s. To get this much, white hot, yellow hot, it's got to be like 1100 centigrade. Houston, we have a problem. Why isn't this drooped over? Aluminum glows, but when it's a puddle. Here's a close-up view of this corner. It kind of looks like the aluminum is even glowing. But if this is white-hot fire down here, that aluminum would be melted. So it appears that it's glowing for a reason other than heat. Now, fluorescent bulbs, kind of a use of plasma instead of resistance heating for the incandescent bulb. If this debris field were hot, would you put an oxygen hose over it? And would you be standing at the other end with a cutting torch? That's suicide, kaboom, but nobody blew up. So this is not from heat. What is this? These guys, if this was hot, it'd be like standing on your backyard grill. And they'd be like, grilled cheese sandwich. But they look like they're alive and well. So I wouldn't say that's hot. A lot of people have seen this image saying, it's proof of heat. Because somebody has this picture and labeled these points. On this picture that was partly a combination between NASA, USGS, and Jet Propulsion Lab. One took a picture, one added something else, and so maybe something got lost along the way, or maybe it's correct data but misinterpreted as thermal heat. This might be something else, some other interesting energy signal. So this point E, they say it's 819 Fahrenheit. Here's 819 Fahrenheit. See, the little lump there is building 3, or the remains of it. Here's building 3. There's a lake there. A water main broke, filled the street with water. And this guy's even walking around in knee-deep water. He doesn't look like a boiled chicken. Water boils at 212 Fahrenheit. So that's not hot. Or it's not water. Again, this is the swamp, West Broadway. Lots of unburned paper. Bushy trees. Full foliage. Not burned. The buildings are not burned. Traffic lights, potted in the ground, are not burned or melted. This guy's engine had better days. Rear end here is kind of on the ground. So for several blocks, all the cars were toasted. No trees toasted, no buildings toasted, no signposts toasted. Do you see a pattern? Cars are up on rubber tires. They're insulated from the ground. Things that go into the ground are grounded. Maybe that has something to do with it. This is during the cleanup. You'll see spontaneous combustion over there. There's a closer up image, but here you have hydraulic equipment that isn't damaged. It's operational. Stuff would just light up. People who say this is fire burning for 99 days, well, it's not hot fire. You know, that equipment, again, hydraulics are permanently damaged if operated over 82 degrees centigrade, about 180 Fahrenheit. This one is
The
kind of
women go
interesting.
in and out of Ground Zero up to 10 times a night, often until 2 in the morning, delivering whatever it is rescue workers need to do their jobs, like the ones working in the hotspots.
Steel-toed boots is one of the biggest things.
Steel-toed boots?
Steel-toed boots. Out still on the rubble, it's still, I believe, 1,100 degrees. The guy's boots just melt within a few hours, and they're burning their feet.
The guy's boots melt in a few hours. We have no reports of burned feet. Yet this statement was repeated over and over again. I don't blame these gals at all. They're trying to explain something. Boots are apparently disintegrating, and they need to be replaced for some reason. But if it was 1,100 degrees and these guys are walking around in boots that are melting, we should at least have a few reports of burned feet. As I like to say, if my steel oven is melting, the turkey inside is more than well done. Yet this was repeated, kind of like the buildings evaporated line. People don't realize that they hear something and they repeat it over and over again. We all do it to some extent, but it's hard to not do it. We operate like a herd. We like to go with the herd. Rudy Giuliani also had made an interesting statement.
There were fires of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit below the ground. I could be standing here and you could be standing there, and I could be describing to you, Governor, the site, and then a fire would break out in between us. And it was just by luck or the design of God that we weren't killed.
2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. They're standing on a grill, and they're not cooked, hotter than a grill. But there's something that reminded them of fire, and that was the best they could explain it, probably. So let's see, that's that one. Another phenomenon I talk about is rolled up carpets. Looks like that. You know, carpets come rolled up, but how does that apply to the building? Well, looking at how the tower is constructed, it has these prefab units of 3 columns wide by 3 stories tall. And they're loaded axially. So if you overload them, whether the building is, steel gets too hot, so it can't hold the weight, or you whop something down on it, it's going to buckle. Whether it buckles in or out, it'll buckle. So it'll curve around the horizontal axis, like this. It'll bend around bend over around the horizontal axis. So why are these columns straight? A nice hole in the ground there, it's empty. Not much else around, but straight. They weren't bent over. There were some columns that were bent, but when things, you probably squashed aluminum cans, you have a very sharp corner on them. Not smooth like that. And these are not even cracked. I don't know how you could bend that even if you heated it. A smooth bend like that without cracking it. More than 180 degrees. Those vertical columns were found bent around the vertical axis, not bent over around the horizontal axis. They were curved around the vertical axis. Doesn't make sense. They kind of look like a rolled-up carpet. Straight columns, but they're curled around the vertical axis. And that sure doesn't look like a buckled column. It looks more like a piece of lasagna noodle. Some I-beams also curled around the vertical axis. Instead of, if you overloaded something, it would sag like that. So what explains this? And a smooth curvature. Here's some columns of wheat checks falling down, a section of them. This is down where building 3 is. This is tower 2 coming apart. This is higher up because you don't see building 3 yet. So this chunk here, as it falls, notice this zone here. You see the material is missing. So this thing came apart between these two images on its way down. Why? It wasn't overloaded. Then in Banker's Trust, there's this beam or column. I don't think there's any way you can mechanically load this beam to get what we saw. Loading it, however, does not do that. That looks like a rubber band that was snapped, or something that was melted or coiled up and whatever. There's no fire in this building, and steel doesn't melt like that. It's got some holes there, but this wrinkling here, that cannot be explained by any mechanical loading. Proof of concept. Something caused this. I can't tell you what caused this because I'm not the one who ran the equipment, but I can show you something that can replicate all of the effects we've seen. Here's these columns we saw at the World Trade Center. This is what someone has done in their lab. This metal is not kinked, not buckled, smooth curvature. This is solid copper, about 2.5 inches in diameter, and this is solid molybdenum. Here's that lasagna noodle. Now we have WFC1. What's interesting, again, no pockmarks in the surface from being like machine gunned. The windows are busted and the marble facade. 100% of the marble facade is missing, kind of like porcelain toilets. And we have this parking problem in front. This car is toasted, but this one has the tires that go in the wrong direction. It's upside down. Doesn't look too toasted. The inner pane is still intact, but the outer pane is broken. Rocks don't do that. So we have evidence of levitation and toasting or levitation. Here's evidence of, more evidence of levitation.
Street, and I picked up the camera just out of habit. And something in the back of my mind said, run, run, run. And never in 20 years of shooting in New York have I run from an assignment. But something in the back of my head just said, run. And as I hit the corner of Liberty Street, it was almost being picked up by a tornado, almost being picked up by a wave. It was like being picked up by
the black cloud.
That black cloud had substance. It was like night, but it had a solid feel to it. It was like gravel, hot gravel, and just picked me up and tossed me about a block. At one second I was running, and the next second I was airborne. And I lost my glasses, I lost my cell phone, I lost my pager, but managed to hold on to both cameras.
But it threw you for a block?
I was back down at Ground Zero last week and walked the area where I have a pretty good recollection of where I was and where I wound up. and it was just under a city block.
There was this blast of warm air. It wasn't hot. It was warm. And it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building that was...
You were picked up off the ground?
Physically picked up off the ground.
I remember an explosion. At that point, I got knocked out. I don't remember anything. Then I got up, and I looked out the window because the windows exploded, and the street below caved in.
There was an EMT who was carried down some stairs. She didn't know how she got down there, so best explanation she could come up with is that she died, and God picked her up and carried her. She floated down the stairs. Also, those first responders who were in the bottom stairwell of stairwell B of Tower 1, while the tower was coming apart, they talked about having been floated up and down the stairs. They thought maybe they were being tossed, but they were going from the 3rd floor to the 4th floor to the 3rd floor. Here's what somebody reproduced in their lab. It's a toy boat here. They have water flying upward. Now, folks often say this guy is a hoax. He films everything upside down in a box. How do you do that with water? Can you hold the water to a box with a magnet? This water is wafting upward. That's just a taste. We'll come back to that. Let's look at the weather that day. It's a high-pressure system moving eastward that they showed on the Fox News. They also showed on CBS, weather over Manhattan as nice as can be. Kind of interesting. Then we have Geraldo Rivera a year ago. He knows about all the hurricanes. For the past 40 years, he's celebrating of doing the news. They're reminiscing all the various hurricanes along the way. And this was just a year ago. He said this.
Morning. You know, people ask me why I have been so attracted over the years to hurricane coverage, but there's risk involved. There is, you know, the peril of not knowing what's going to happen, that adventure, and it's pitting yourself against an enemy. It's like war, only no one is shooting at you specifically. That's what the allure, but there is nary a storm that I am not, the juices don't flow, and you look and check it out.
Look at that. Remember that? When that I watched that live.
Too. And maybe a store on YouTube. You know, you got to get up close and personal. And
this was Hurricane Ike, I think.
This that was recent. That was wasn't this Rita?
You would know.
You know what? I think it was Rita. Isn't it?
Rita in Galveston, Texas. Yeah, Galveston. And you know, obviously Katrina before that changed so many of our histories. It was so traumatic. You know, and it's one funny thing I think of if only a hurricane had come on 9/11. Remember, they didn't know how to use instruments, the terrorists. They took off in Boston, and they literally, after they took over the aircraft, they steered by line of sight. And it was that crystal clear September day.
Sure was.
And if it were only one of these weather days, history would have been rewritten. And I think about that a lot now, and especially this time of year.
So
where the peak of hurricanes is.
Yeah, you're celebrating 40 years?
40 years, imagine that, isn't that?
40 years.
Nary a hurricane that he misses. He missed that one. This was on 9/11. There's the hurricane he wished for. There's New York, right off the end of Long Island. Cape Cod, it was actually raining that day. There was an airline attendant who flew out of Boston that morning. He didn't know there was a hurricane until he saw it on my website. He said that before they take off, they have kind of a powwow with the crew, the pilot, the flight attendants and so forth, about any anomaly they need to deal with. No mention of a hurricane. Pretty interesting. That hurricane was the longest lived hurricane of the season, the first major hurricane of the season. Started out at the end of August. Came up this way, and the 4 days leading up to 9/11, it went in a straight line to New York City. 8 o'clock in the morning, it pulled up to a chalk line, stopped, and turned around that afternoon and started heading out of town. While it was the closest point, it was the largest, kind of unpacked, like a figure skater, kind of stops, and then got smaller again and head out of town. Kind of weird that we didn't hear about it. What do hurricanes do, after all? Well, here's a storm front. Here's the ground. You have like a static field between the two. Ahead of a hurricane or a weather system, you know, people often say they can feel the weather coming, they can feel the weather changing, because they feel that different energy system. And you often get dry thunder ahead of a weather system. It's sort of like arcing between 2 points. You know, when you drag your feet along, coming up to, across the carpet and come up to a door handle and reach out, you get a spark, it arcs across. It's kind of like that. Guess what? On 9/11, the 3 major airports surrounding Manhattan reported thunder. In JFK Airport, LaGuardia Airport, and Newark airports. So we know that hurricane was close enough to cause a static field around it. Here's what was shown on these 4 networks about 10 minutes to 15 minutes before the North Tower got its hole, before the first event of the day. So there's no reason to not have business as usual. I drew in these red arrows pointing out the lightning all around the perimeter of the country. Because there's this high pressure system, and all around the edge of that you had an electrical storm going on. But here's what should have been shown. And a weatherman that I know, Scott Stevens, said, like, how much effort does it take to put an icon on the map? Here. This is the approximate size of the hurricane and the location at that moment. In full view, is right against the coast. Let's look at the Earth's magnetic field. Oops. Several days before 9/11, it was kind of uneventful. Now, this was recorded in Alaska, ground-based magnetometers at 6 different locations. I also looked at satellite magnetometers. That was uneventful until about a day later, until a day after 9/11. So there was no space storms, the sun didn't have any coronal mass ejections or anything like that in this time period. These vertical lines are when each of the major events happened on 9/11. WTC-1 first gets its hole, and then WTC-2 gets its hole. WTC-2 goes poof, 1 goes poof, and then Building 7 goes poof. But the key thing here is approaching this, notice about 20 minutes before the North Tower gets its hole, the magnetic field starts to shift downward. As soon as it gets its hole, it starts back upward. And as soon as the second tower gets its hole, it goes horizontal again. But it starts going downhill, really goes downhill after Tower 2 goes away, and then when Tower 1 goes poof, it really drops off. It's haywire all afternoon. Until Building 7 goes poof. Just coincidence, right? Then it's sort of back to normal, almost. Now, what was going on all during this time? All of that, the fumes and stuff were pouring out of Building 7. Like all of the mass was pouring out of Building 7. It was dustifying. So here's the magnetometer readings. Here's the weather reported at JFK Airport. Notice the humidity goes down in a linear pattern. This is the pressure, air pressure at JFK Airport. Notice it was going up because we had the high pressure system moving in. At the same time, the hurricane was moving in from the other direction. And guess when they met? 10 a.m. on the morning of 9/11. We have two counter-rotating systems. Hurricanes move one direction. High pressure systems in the northern hemisphere move the opposite direction. They sometimes call them anticyclones. So the hurricane's a cyclone and the high pressure system's an anticyclone. So two counter-rotating systems right over each other. Let's get back to more proof of concept. The Hutchison effect. John Hutchison's work reproduces all of these same effects, all of them, more than the ones that I've even shown you. A summary of the type of effect, jellification. Things turn into jelly. And then when you turn the gizmo off, they re-solidify, if they haven't separated completely. And recall the curved beams and columns that weren't kinked or buckled or crackled. Bent beams, slow bending of metals, shredded metal structures, fractured metal structures, peeling appearance, like the metal's just peeled open, even though it's an extruded metal. Fusion of dissimilar materials, like paper, looks like it's melted inside of steel. That's pretty weird. Thinning and rapid aging, lift or disruption, toasted looking metal, circular holes in material, like buildings, reduced mass of materials, rounded holes in glass, lather. There's a tremendous amount of, weird fires. And then we have this fellow, George Pigott. He actually came up with this earlier. Do you realize 100 years today, his patent was granted on this technology? Today, 100 years. Here he is with his little bow tie on, observing his experiment. I think that's a kind of an interesting picture. He's got a static field generated. There's a Leyden jar somewhere, and he's got these balls suspended in that field. Levitation. Interesting, a static field. He applied for the patent in 1903. That was a long time ago. Thomas Townsend Brown did a lot of work on anti-gravity. Ed Leedskalnin built Coral Castle in Florida. He's said to have been about 100 pounds, but he'd lift 15-ton stones. Somehow. Here's part of Coral Castle. Here's the Great Pyramid. John Hutchison. Now, notice this person is standing at the base, about a little over one stone, maybe almost two of these stones tall, a little less. About the same height as that doorway in Coral Castle. Turns out the size of these stones is just about the same as, or the weight is just about the same as those of the Great Pyramid. Some of the stones that Ed Leedskalnin lifted were even heavier than the heaviest stones at the Great Pyramid. How do you do that? A 100-pound guy? He had a little tripod with a chain on it that couldn't have held very many pounds. But he had that gizmo with the magnetic flywheel. Now we're going to look at a sample of John Hutchison's work. See, he's still amongst us. He had another birthday a few days ago. He can demonstrate this in the here and now. I can't go back and visit George Pigott or Nikola Tesla. But I can go visit John Hutchison and see a demonstration of this. And here's an iron block, 2 inches by 2 inches by 7 inches tall, solid iron. This is what it used to be. This thing buckles over, and notice the fumes coming off of it. They'll come off partway through, and we saw fumes coming out of a door handle. See this door handle? This is at on 9/11. The fumes. It's a broken window. If something needs to vent out, why doesn't it go out the window? And John Hutchison's samples are a little bit cooler than ambient temperature after he's finished with them. It's not hot. Kind of reminds you of these, what look to be fires, the Cheeto fires and Cheetos in the ground. They're orange, they're glowing, not necessarily hot. John has a boat, toy boat in the water. Notice when he turns the power off, you can see when it's going because the water jumps up. The boat goes into spontaneous combustion. So here's the water, he's got the signal going now, and then he turns it off, and then it ignites. Kind of like the toasted cars. They ignited after the tower was destroyed, immediately after. It's a plastic boat. What's catching on fire? This thing's kind of interesting. A solid piece of steel. Jelly. Now watch this piece of steel here. In this area, it'll come apart and move. He plugs this into a regular wall outlet. He's not efficient about it. He's not really a scientist. He just enjoys playing with this different type of technology. He tried to replicate the work of Nikola Tesla, and he started discovering, hey, this is fun. Listen, we can make this thing fly up in the air. And so he does it with a sense of intuition and feel for how to mix the signals. What he does is create a static field, and within the static field, he interferes radio frequency signals. Like microwave, as an example. It's not the microwave signal, and it's not the static field. It's the combination. It's kind of like a key opening a lock. Another kind of interesting issue. This is right across from where that building went missing. Building 4, right across the street from it, you have these round holes through one pane sometimes, without breaking the inner pane. Holes here, they're roundish kind of holes. Some look even more round. If you throw a baseball through it, I'd love to see a kid ask the teacher this. Teacher, when I throw a baseball through the window, it looks like a spiderweb pattern. Why doesn't that look like that? Because when a rock hits a window, a mechanical load hits a window, it bends it. And glass is a brittle material that can't handle tension. And that outer edge, when it bows out, breaks from the tension. So what's going on here? This is actually done in someone's lab with longitudinal energy waves. This is kind of an analogy I drew. Imagine this, turn it sideways and drop a pebble into a pond and it sends a ripple out. Imagine something not a mechanical load but another kind of load that sends a ripple outward. I wonder if that's what makes that round hole. It is very rounded. Let's go back to look at it and keep jumping around because all these things kind of come together. Hurricane Andrew. There's a 2x4 through the palm tree. How does that happen? Plywood. And I'm sure you've heard of straw through trees. But we're told, we don't know this, but we're told the straw is flying so fast it goes through trees. Does that make sense? You stop and think about it? Because force is force. Equal and opposite forces on the two. How can straw build up that much force to go through a tree? Well, it turns out that with John Hutchison's work. He's got this knife in this aluminum block. He's also got a piece of wood in aluminum. Wood would burn up if you heated it hot enough to melt the aluminum. But they blend into each other. It's as though when the signal is turned on, I say it's sort of analogous to musical chairs. While the music's playing, people are walking around, you take one of the chairs away, and then when the music stops, people are supposed to sit back down, and somebody misses out because they don't have a chair. Well, think of the atoms and molecules like that. They kind of let go and they're up and moving around when the music stops. They try to grab onto something and some of them miss out. And I think that explains some of the rustification that we see. But it explains also the jellification of some materials. Then when the signal stops, it resolidifies. Let's think of what hurricanes and tornadoes do. It's a lot like a Tesla coil. And also creates a static field. Now these are a little bit out of place, but it's interesting, this rustification here. So we're talking about, I guess actually it's in the right place, musical chairs. When the steel, the music's playing, the molecules and so forth let go of each other. Structural steel isn't just iron. It's mostly iron, but it has a few other doodads added in, like carbon, so forth, to help its structural properties and to help it be more resistant to environmental effects. Steel does not rust that easily. Iron rusts instantly, just about. Get an iron skillet, leave it in your sinks with water in it, you come back, it's bright orange. Unless it has a layer of grease or something on it. But it's easily rusts real quickly. Steel does not. So how do you get steel to rust like iron? Let's say it was the musical chairs type of analogy was going on, and the stuff was floating around so much it didn't quite grab back in with the carbon atoms and so forth, and it's turned into pure iron on the surface. Then it would rust like that. This is Banker's Trust. Banker's Trust was damaged. Didn't have a fire in it. It was right across the street from Building 2. And they decided to repair it afterwards. They repaired it, and then they started taking it apart, dismantling it. And they took it down floor by floor, and they got down to that area where they had repaired it. And this was that region. That's where all the rust is. Pretty weird. That looks like it's been at the bottom of the ocean for 100 years. So for those who need to compare ideas, what I present is not a theory. I present evidence, and I have evidence of something that can mimic all the effects. I'm not saying it is that. I think the only person who knows is who pushed the button that day, or who held the gun to their head to make them do it. But what we see is how we could replicate all of the effects. Now, these are the bits of evidence that we have. These are the theories or speculations or hypotheses. They can't produce any of these effects. Matter of fact, to the contrary. You put a bomb in the basement, you break the bathtub. Bombs are hot. If you break the bathtub and water rushes in, you have a steam explosion. You also have a seismic signal with the big bomb in the basement. If you cut the building up for controlled demolition and drop it to the ground, you'd have a pile of rubble left. It just goes on and on. None of these things can explain any of those. So, where did the towers go? Gone with the wind. I have a few other slides if you're interested in those. After this, I just put them in at the end. What thermite does, for anyone who's not cured of that idea. There's a slight problem with thermite. If thermite were used to destroy the towers, there's something missing. I don't know if you've heard this song before. Blinded by the light. Anyone in that area would have been blinded by the light, whether it's a nuke or a bunch of thermite. This is what thermite's used for, welding railroad tracks. It's also used for burning paper.
Did you see above our heads?
This is a tornado.
Look above you, right here.
Look at that.
Oh my God. Get behind these fuckers. Further shot. Shoot.
I'm shooting.
Good.
Dude, look at the funnel.
Oh my God, look at the funnel. This is incredible. We're backing up.
We are. Oh, I hope he backs up. He's going to be right in the middle of that.
We're backing up. Oh my God, are you getting this, Katie?
I'm getting it.
I gotta get some shots. I gotta get some stuff. Hang on.
Ow!
Sorry.
Look at this, baby. Look at this.
Tell me what it's doing.
Folks think of tornadoes as being like a vortex, that, like a toilet draining that comes down from the sky. It's an energy field, a vortex type of energy field that happens to occur naturally. This one started from the ground up. It's a potential between the clouds and the ground. It turns out that there's a whole lot of similarities between this and what happened in 9/11. People talk about anti-gravity. And those who have been inside a tornado and picked up by one, they can breathe fine. It's not like a big vacuum cleaner. Hopefully they don't get too busted up. Let's see. Is that, now that you've seen all of the slides, you look at this. Can you call that a collapse? That is a new process we've never seen before. This looks like a squirting out. Or like foam. It really wasn't that loud. And there's something else that some folks have wanted me to talk about. Here's the hole in the North Tower. The plane-shaped hole. It's a hole. I don't go into why it's there, what caused it. But what I will say is this little slot here, airplane wings can't do that. But up here at the 105th floor, notice that fellow. We're going to take a closer look. We heard about all these jumpers. There he is there. These guys over here, some of them have their shirt off, some have their pants off. Does that make sense if it's hot? Would they do it because of a bomb in the building? Would they do it because of fire? Why would they do that? And this fellow looks like he's taking his pants off. This is the 105th floor. Okay, if he needs to take his pants off, for some bizarre reason, we don't need to solve that for this question, why doesn't he just step inside? Smoke, you say? Well, he could hold his breath, step inside, take the pants off, and get back out. So why doesn't he do that? Why does he have to take his pants off while dangling from the 105th floor by like one hand and 1 foot? And the firefighters on the ground, those poor guys, that must have been utter torment. They've been trained to save lives, and there was nothing they could do. They had to watch. There's one fellow that they talked about having to watch because he wanted to go out and start catching people. Feeling helpless, I think, is about the worst human emotion there is. And they've been trained to save lives. And several of the fellows said that there's like 5 a minute, 4 a minute, 3 a minute out of each face of the building. Let's estimate 3 a minute out of each face of the building the whole time. That's 4, 3 a minute, 4 faces, that's 12 a minute. The building was standing for 100 minutes, that's 1,200 people. Left the North Tower, approximately. And there was 343 firefighters that were killed in the basement. Add those together, that's 1,543. Guess how many separate people were identified? Just under 1,600. So it's approximately the number of people who left the building. What happened to people in the building? Probably the same as the rest. Now, what would cause you to do this? These people want to live, or else they wouldn't still be hanging on. And the firefighters had never seen people jump like this before. Maybe they'd seen, in all their 20 years on the force, seen one jumper from a building, and that was like the 3rd story. Nothing like this. Something different was going on. So if I'm up there and the building's on fire, I'm going to go to the bathroom as fast as I can before we lose water pressure and get myself wet. I'd be wet. Maybe if I had some extra clothing, soak that down, wrap it around my head, and head for the door, head for the stairs. If the sprinklers came on, I'd be wet. If the sprinklers didn't come on, it was hot in there, I'd be wet. So it's a good chance these people are wet. Now, they have a lot of motivation to take their clothes off, because firefighters wear extra clothes to protect them from fires. They don't fight fires in the nude. So there's something else going on there too. That isn't because they're hot. You know, when you put, this is just an example, not meant to imply that's exactly what it was, but when you put food on a paper plate in the oven, in the microwave oven, the chicken on the plate cooks, but the paper plate doesn't, if it doesn't have water molecules in it. If it's wet, then it heats up. Water molecules are affected more by microwave energy. It's a form of directed energy. Let's say there's some type of energy field within the building, maybe microwave. So if you were wet clothing, you'd want to get those wet clothes off, or else you'd be feeling like you were being fried. Crowd control, nowadays they have this active denial system that microwaves a crowd, makes them want to just get out of there as fast as they can. So the active denial system, they call it. But really, this behavior seems explainable by some weird energy field within the building, because they're hanging outside the building. Also, they want to take their clothes off outside the building. People hear about thermitic material being found in the dust. What's thermitic material? Well, we have a building that was turned to powder midair. What was the building made out of? It was a steel structure with aluminum cladding. Let's dustify that, turn the building into nanodust. You have aluminum and iron. Iron, that fine, is going to rust immediately. Guess what thermite is? Yeah. This and this. So if we didn't have that in the dust, something more serious would be wrong. People will talk about hearing booms. Remember, hot things glow, but not everything that glows is hot? Bombs go boom, but not everything that goes boom is a bomb. It's a Scott tank. The air tanks the firefighters wore, there were quite a few firefighters who witnessed Scott tanks exploding at ground level that were in fire trucks. So, pretty much ends it. Like to say something here. I am just kind of overwhelmed by you folks. An audience who wants to hear about this, who wants to understand. It just really warms my heart. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely awesome bit of research there. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Judy Wood.
Thank you.
Need more, Larry.